What if the qualities that make a man powerful are the exact same qualities that make society uncomfortable around him? That's a question most people never stop to ask. From an early age, men are taught to be agreeable, predictable, and harmless. They're told that being liked is more important than being respected, that avoiding conflict is always virtuous, and that sacrificing their own ambitions for the comfort of others is a sign of good character. But what if that's only half the story? Machiavelli understood something that remains controversial even today. The world does not reward weakness simply because it is polite. In fact, some of the most respected individuals in history shared a trait that many people secretly fear. They were capable of becoming dangerous, but they learned how to control that power instead of being controlled by it. That's the difference between a threat and a master. One acts impulsively, the other acts deliberately. Here's the paradox. The moment a man starts developing true emotional mastery, stronger boundaries, strategic silence, and deeper self-sovereignty, some people will say he's changed for the worse. They'll call him cold, distant, difficult, maybe even arrogant. Yet often, what they're really witnessing is the death of the version of him they could easily influence. Psychology reveals that transformation rarely looks attractive from the outside. When a man stops seeking validation, refuses manipulation, sees reality without illusions, and protects his mission above temporary approval, he becomes harder to control, and people tend to react strongly when control begins slipping from their hands. The truth is that becoming powerful isn't about domination, aggression, or intimidation. It's about developing the inner strength to remain calm in chaos, disciplined under pressure, and focused when distractions are everywhere. It's about understanding power dynamics without becoming a slave to them. And most importantly, it's about learning how to govern yourself before attempting to influence anything else. In this video, you'll discover 7 powerful signs that you're evolving beyond the mindset of the average man. Some of these signs may surprise you. Some may challenge what you've been taught your entire life. And if you recognize yourself in several of them, you may already be walking a path that very few people have the courage to follow. Most people spend years believing that being harmless is a virtue. They learn to avoid conflict, stay agreeable, and make themselves easy to control. Society often rewards this behavior with temporary comfort, praise, and acceptance. But there's a hidden cost that few people notice until much later. A harmless man may be liked, yet he is rarely respected when pressure enters the room. In the lens of psychology, there is a profound difference between kindness and weakness. One is a choice made from strength, while the other is often a habit born from fear. Machiavelli understood something that still makes people uncomfortable today. The world does not truly trust a man who lacks the ability to defend himself. Think about it for a moment. Nobody feels safe behind a shield made of paper. A powerful man possesses the capacity for force, but chooses restraint when appropriate. That's entirely different from someone who remains passive simply because he has no alternative. Power dynamics are shaped by capability, not by appearances, and people instinctively recognize the difference, even when they never speak about it. A man begins to change the moment he realizes that constant obedience is not the same thing as virtue. Many spend years trapped inside what modern culture calls the nice guy mentality. They say yes when they mean no. They tolerate disrespect to avoid tension. They sacrifice their own goals to gain approval that never fully arrives. Then one day they notice a painful pattern. The more they seek validation, the less valuable they appear. That realization feels uncomfortable at first, but it often becomes the first step towards self-sovereignty. Imagine a worker who constantly accepts extra responsibilities without recognition. He stays late, solves problems, and avoids disagreement because he wants everyone to appreciate him. Yet promotions go elsewhere. Respect goes elsewhere. Opportunities somehow pass him by. Meanwhile, the person who calmly establishes boundaries is treated differently. This isn't always fair, but psychology rarely operates according to fairness. Human beings often respond more strongly to confidence and certainty than to endless accommodation. One of the most important awakenings occurs when a man stops asking, "How can I make everyone happy?" and starts asking, "What is worth protecting?" That shift changes everything. His energy becomes more deliberate. his words carry more weight. He stops chasing every invitation, every opinion, and every opportunity to prove himself. Instead, he begins developing strategic silence, observing more than he speaks. Ironically, the less desperate he becomes for attention, the more attention he tends to receive. This transformation is rarely dramatic. There is no lightning bolt, no movie soundtrack playing in the background. It usually begins with small decisions repeated consistently. A boundary here, a refusal there, a growing awareness that strength and goodness are not enemies. As emotional mastery slowly replaces approval-seeking behavior, a new challenge emerges, and that challenge revolves around something many men spend their entire lives chasing without ever questioning whether it deserves to be chased at all. There comes a moment in a man's life when he realizes that the need to be liked has been quietly controlling him, not with chains, but with invisible strings. Every decision, every opinion, every action is filtered through a single question: what will people think? At first, this seems harmless. After all, everyone wants acceptance. But psychology reveals a deeper truth. A man who depends on approval has handed over ownership of his emotional state to people who may not even care about his future. Many people spend years collecting approval the way a child collects trophies. They feel successful when praised and devastated when criticized. Their confidence rises and falls depending on the reactions of others. The problem is that public opinion changes like the weather. One day they are admired, the next day they are questioned. A man who builds his identity on external validation is building his house on shifting sand. Self-sovereignty begins when he decides that his values matter more than the applause of the crowd. Machiavelli observed that respect and approval are often very different currencies. People may approve of someone who never creates friction, never disagrees, and never defends his position. Yet deep respect usually belongs to those who stand firm when pressure appears. Consider the person who politely declines an unreasonable request. At first, others may be disappointed. Some may even become irritated. But over time, they learn something important. This person cannot be easily manipulated. In the world of power dynamics, that realization changes every future interaction. Learning to say no without guilt feels uncomfortable in the beginning. A man may feel selfish simply because he is protecting his time or energy. He might worry that others will see him differently. The irony is that they usually do, but not in the way he fears. When boundaries are communicated calmly and clearly, people often adjust far more quickly than expected. The real battle is internal. Emotional mastery requires resisting the urge to explain, justify, or apologize for every decision that protects a meaningful goal. This is where many misunderstand the concept of strategic cruelty. They imagine aggression, hostility, or cold-hearted behavior. That's not what it means. Strategic cruelty is the willingness to disappoint people when necessary in order to protect a mission that matters. A man may choose to leave a draining relationship, decline endless favors, or step away from environments that sabotage his growth. Those decisions can appear harsh to outsiders. Yet sometimes the kindest thing he can do for his future self is refuse to sacrifice it for temporary comfort. As validation loses its grip, something unexpected happens. His attention shifts away from managing people's perceptions and toward managing his own direction. He becomes less reactive to praise and less wounded by criticism. Strategic silence starts replacing the need to constantly explain himself. He begins thinking several moves ahead instead of reacting emotionally to every situation. And once that shift takes root, another transformation quietly begins. The development of a mind capable of remaining calm, even when chaos surrounds it. Before we continue, think about what you've heard so far. If you're starting to realize how much of your life has been shaped by the need for approval, and why true power begins with self-respect rather than validation, then there's something you need to see. I created the Silent Influence Code, a practical guide that reveals the psychological signals that shape how people perceive, trust, and respond to you, inspired by timeless Machiavellian principles and modern psychology. If you're ready to stop seeking approval and start building real influence, click the link in the pinned comment and get instant access. Because the moment you understand the hidden rules behind human behavior, You stop playing the game blindly. One of the clearest signs that a man is changing is not that he becomes louder, tougher, or more intimidating. It's that he becomes harder to shake. Life continues, throwing problems at him. People continue testing him, and unexpected setbacks still appear. The difference is that he no longer reacts the way he once did. Psychology teaches that emotional reactions are often predictable patterns, and predictable patterns are easy for others to manipulate. Emotional mastery begins when a man learns to observe his emotions without immediately obeying them. Most people believe strength means feeling less. In reality, strength often means feeling everything and remaining in control anyway. Anger arrives, but it doesn't take over. Fear appears, but it doesn't dictate decisions. Frustration knocks on the door, but it isn't invited to run the house. A wise man understands that emotions are valuable sources of information, not masters to be served. This mindset creates a powerful advantage because while others are reacting impulsively, he is evaluating the situation with clarity and purpose. There is a concept that can be called the emotional zero point. It is the state where external events lose the power to pull a man into unnecessary extremes. Praise doesn't make him arrogant. Criticism doesn't make him collapse. Success doesn't blind him, and failure doesn't define him. He returns to center quickly. Imagine a captain navigating rough waters. The ocean may become violent, but the captain's focus remains fixed on the destination. That inner stability becomes one of the foundations of self-sovereignty. A practical example can be seen during conflict. Someone insults him publicly, hoping to provoke a reaction. Most people immediately defend themselves, raise their voices, or attempt to win the argument. The strategist does something different. He pauses. He evaluates. Sometimes he responds calmly. Sometimes he says nothing at all. Strategic silence becomes a weapon because it denies others the emotional reaction they were expecting. In power dynamics, the person who controls the emotional temperature of the interaction often controls the interaction itself. Machiavelli understood that successful leaders are rarely prisoners of the present moment. They think beyond immediate feelings and focus on consequences. While others ask, "How do I feel right now?" the strategist asks, "Where does this path lead?" That single shift changes countless decisions. He stops seeing himself as a victim of circumstances and starts viewing himself as a participant capable of influencing outcomes. Even when situations are unfair, he looks for leverage instead of excuses. That's where strategic thinking begins to replace emotional helplessness. Over time, this way of thinking creates a profound transformation. Challenges stop feeling like personal attacks and start looking like puzzles waiting to be solved. Energy that was once wasted on resentment becomes available for growth. Emotional mastery strengthens discipline. Discipline strengthens clarity, and clarity strengthens action. Yet, as his vision sharpens, another realization emerges. He starts noticing that many of the beliefs he once accepted about people, authority, and human nature were built on illusions that no longer survive close examination. One of the most unsettling moments in a man's development happens when he begins seeing people as they truly are, rather than as he wishes they were. For years, many place others on pedestals without realizing it. They assume certain individuals possess extraordinary wisdom, flawless character, or hidden superiority. Yet psychology reveals that most people are simply human beings navigating their own fears, desires, insecurities, and ambitions. The moment those illusions begin to fade, reality can feel both liberating and uncomfortable. Suddenly, the world becomes less magical, but far more understandable. This shift often starts when someone disappoints him. Maybe it's a mentor, a boss, a public figure, or even a close friend. At first, the disappointment feels personal. He wonders what went wrong. Then a deeper realization arrives. The person was never the perfect image he created in his mind. The image was the illusion. Machiavelli understood that effective observation requires separating reality from fantasy. A strategist doesn't study who people claim to be. He studies patterns, incentives, actions, and behavior under pressure. The same principle applies to authority figures. As children, many people see authority as something almost sacred. Teachers, leaders, executives, politicians, and experts can appear larger than life. but maturity reveals a different picture. Some are competent, some are not. Some deserve respect, some merely occupy a position. Power dynamics become easier to understand when a man recognizes that titles alone do not create wisdom. Authority can influence behavior, but it does not automatically create character, intelligence, or integrity. Relationships also change when illusions disappear. Instead of idealizing others, he begins evaluating compatibility, trustworthiness, and consistency. He pays attention to actions rather than promises. For example, if someone repeatedly speaks about loyalty but disappears whenever difficulties arise, he no longer ignores the contradiction. Emotional mastery teaches him to accept what he sees instead of defending what he wishes were true. This may sound simple, yet many people spend years exhausting themselves by arguing with reality rather than learning from it. There is an interesting freedom that comes from removing heroes and idols from their pedestals. It doesn't mean becoming cynical or distrustful. It means seeing people with balance. A successful entrepreneur may possess remarkable discipline while struggling in relationships. A charismatic leader may inspire millions while privately battling insecurity. Human nature is complex. Once a man understands this, he stops seeking perfect examples and starts extracting useful lessons wherever they appear. He becomes a student of reality instead of a believer in myths. As this perspective deepens, his vision becomes sharper. He notices motives hidden beneath words, incentives hidden beneath appearances, and emotions hidden beneath performances. Strategic silence helps him observe more than he reveals, while self-sovereignty protects him from blindly following the crowd. Yet with clearer vision comes another challenge. Seeing reality is one thing. Learning how to channel strength, aggression, and influence without losing control of oneself is something entirely different. And that lesson begins where silence becomes power. One of the most misunderstood forms of power is silence. Many assume that influence belongs to the loudest voice, the strongest opinion, or the person who always has an answer. Yet psychology often reveals the opposite. The individual who speaks less is frequently observed more carefully. His words carry weight because they are not scattered carelessly in every direction. Strategic silence creates a certain mystery, and human beings are naturally curious about what they cannot easily read. What remains unsaid often generates more attention than endless explanations ever could. A man begins to understand this when he notices how much energy is wasted through unnecessary disclosure. He tells everyone his plans, his frustrations, his goals, and his next moves. Then he wonders why progress feels difficult. Every conversation becomes a leak in the system. Machiavelli understood that not every thought deserves an audience. Sometimes the strongest position is to remain quiet, continue building, and allow results to speak. In power dynamics, information is a resource, and wise people learn not to distribute valuable resources without purpose. Consider someone who announces every ambition before taking action. Friends applaud. Family encourages him. Social media provides instant validation. For a moment, it feels productive, yet very little has actually changed. Compare that to the person who quietly works for months without seeking attention. One day, the results appear, seemingly out of nowhere. The difference isn't talent, it's focus. Strategic silence protects momentum by keeping energy directed toward execution rather than performance. The less he needs recognition, the more effective he often becomes. At the same time, another force begins demanding attention: aggression. Many people spend years suppressing it because they associate aggression with violence, anger, or recklessness. But aggression itself is not the enemy. Aggression is energy. It is the force that pushes a man to defend boundaries, pursue goals, and confront difficult realities. Emotional mastery is not about eliminating aggression. It is about directing it intelligently. A river becomes destructive when uncontrolled, but it becomes useful when guided through the right channels. This is where many transformations either succeed or fail. A man who suppresses aggression completely often becomes passive and resentful. A man who unleashes it recklessly becomes unstable and dangerous. The strategist seeks a third path. He learns to integrate that energy into discipline, action, and determination. When challenged, he remains calm. When necessary, he stands firm. He doesn't explode at every provocation because he no longer needs to prove his strength. True confidence rarely feels the need to advertise itself. Over time, people begin sensing this change. They notice that he is not easily intimidated, manipulated, or pushed off course. His presence becomes more grounded. His words become more deliberate. Self-sovereignty grows stronger because he no longer fears either conflict or solitude. Yet there is still one final transformation waiting ahead. It requires sacrificing distractions, embracing isolation when necessary, and accepting a truth that many avoid their entire lives. Every meaningful form of power demands a price. There comes a point in a man's development when he realizes that his greatest enemy is not another person. It is distraction, not the obvious kind, either. The most dangerous distractions often arrive disguised as opportunities, entertainment, comfort, or endless obligations that slowly drain his attention. Psychology shows that attention is one of the most valuable resources a person possesses. Where attention goes, life follows. A man who cannot control his focus will eventually find himself building someone else's vision while neglecting his own. This realization changes the way he approaches his days. Instead of asking, "What do I feel like doing?" he starts asking, "What deserves my energy?" The difference may seem small, but it creates entirely different outcomes over time. Many people chase temporary stimulation because it feels rewarding in the moment. Meanwhile, meaningful growth often feels repetitive, difficult, and slow. Machiavelli understood that long-term victories are rarely won through bursts of motivation. They are earned through disciplined consistency, especially when excitement disappears and only commitment remains. One of the hardest lessons to accept is that not everyone can accompany him on this journey. As he becomes more focused, some relationships naturally weaken. Certain conversations no longer interest him. Some environments begin feeling restrictive rather than supportive. At first, this can feel lonely. Human beings naturally seek belonging, yet solitude and loneliness are not the same thing. Loneliness is the pain of feeling disconnected. Solitude is the ability to remain connected to oneself. That distinction becomes one of the foundations of self-sovereignty. Many people fear being alone because silence forces them to confront thoughts they usually avoid. A man pursuing growth eventually learns to welcome those moments. He uses solitude to reflect, evaluate, and recalibrate. Strategic silence becomes more than a social tool. It becomes an internal practice. Instead of constantly consuming noise, he creates space for clarity. Some of the most important decisions of his life will emerge not from crowded rooms, but from quiet moments when nobody else is influencing his judgment. There is also a price attached to every meaningful level of power. Few people talk about it openly. Greater independence often means less external validation. Greater discipline may require temporary sacrifices. Greater clarity may force him to outgrow certain habits, environments, and even relationships. Emotional mastery helps him accept these realities without resentment. He understands that every path closes other paths. Rather than complaining about the cost, he focuses on whether the destination is worth paying for. Eventually, he reaches a stage where approval matters less than purpose, comfort matters less than growth, and noise matters less than truth. Power dynamics no longer dominate his decisions because he is no longer trying to win every social game. He has learned to govern himself. His focus is protected. His emotions are disciplined. His actions are intentional. And while the world may call this transformation dangerous, the strategist understands something deeper. A man becomes truly powerful the moment he becomes impossible to rule from the outside. Now the question is no longer whether these signs are real. The question is whether you're willing to embrace what they demand from you. Because becoming a powerful man isn't a single decision. It's a series of choices made every day. The choice to remain calm when others lose control. The choice to protect your mission when distractions call your name. The choice to value respect over approval, truth over comfort, and growth over temporary gratification. Most people will never make those choices consistently. That's why most people remain exactly where they are. Take a moment and think honestly about your own life. Which of these signs have you already developed? Where are you still giving away your power? Are you still seeking validation from people who have done nothing to earn your respect? Are you reacting emotionally to situations that should be approached strategically? Are you building your future or simply responding to whatever happens around you? Remember, every powerful transformation begins with awareness. Once you see these patterns, you can't unsee them. Once you recognize the games, the illusions, and the hidden forces shaping human behavior, you're faced with a choice. You can return to old habits, or you can continue developing the discipline, emotional mastery, strategic silence, and self-sovereignty that separate leaders from followers. And here's something worth remembering. The world doesn't change when you wish for better circumstances. It changes when you become the kind of person who can create better circumstances. That's the real lesson behind Machiavelli's understanding of psychology and power dynamics. The greatest victory is not controlling others, it's mastering yourself. So tell me in the comments, which of these 7 signs describes you the most right now? And which one do you need to develop further? I'd genuinely like to hear your thoughts. If you enjoyed this video and want to continue exploring the deeper lessons of Machiavelli, psychology, power, influence, and self-mastery, make sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and activate the notification bell so you never miss a future lesson. The path to power isn't easy, but neither is living a life controlled by fear, approval, and limitation. The choice, as always, is yours.